if you listen, if you really listen without just listening to something, really listen, you can hear the silence. The silence in which we chose to be born. The silence in which we choose our lives. The silence in which we can choose our death.
Evil souls viewed as symbols which resemble Satan's cynical possessing from the nonchalance of apostles and guards superficial hostile mirage. Obstacles guard forever faithful towards my squad against all odds. Death before the sauna, picture perfect panorama of supreme peace, nirvana, escape, hate and drama. Placed on the planet where the blessed take it for granted. Don't understand it. Above love, haters demand it. Fake underhanded, Neanderthals who blame for failed to notice. Resistance is hopeless as death approaches. Love at the focus, wanna lead entrepreneurs, fraudulent opponents. Speak of my honest repertoire, conquer connoisseurs. Sustain trauma for mental wars, evicted from the realms of hell. While Satan once before, pain I must endure. While blood drip from my pore, perform verbal intercourse with two mics. Menage a trois, sabotage your odds with this vicious verbal collage. Murder members of your entourage and send my regards. Regard, 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 regard. It's do or die. Life resembles Russian roulette. Kill or be killed out from an eye. Sacrifice life and accept. What's next? After I excel like last breath. Silence is everlasting silence. It's do or die. Life resembles Russian roulette. Kill or be killed out from an eye. Sacrifice life and accept. What's next? After I excel like last breath. Silence of serenity in everlasting silence. And walk on excursions within street blocks vicinity. Urban the beast, marks emerging the street blocks the urgent epitome of evil achieved by human seas on paradise. Third eye sight, blinded by human breeze and Fahrenheit. A parasite through the usage of abusive words, which slaughters your auditory sense organs, acoustic nerves. Silence is served from the third rock from the sun. Kingdom of sex, money and drugs, and fugitives on the run. I've yet to meet adequate adversary, sources to feed the elite. Eminent emissary, conquered the weak, critique my doctrine, thesis of being self-indulgent. Dwelt in hell for 3 days as Jesus the high exalted, prestigious, consulted the prominent culprits and clients. My alliance coexist with units but self-reliant. Earth run by violence, it's been said the first one to triumph usually has the dirt done inside. Do or die. Life resembles Russian roulette. Kill or be killed out for an eye. Fact of life and accept. What's next? After I excel like last breath. Silence of serenity in everlasting silence. It's do or die. Life resembles Russian roulette. Kill or be killed out for an eye. Fact of life and accept. What's next? After I excel like last breath. Silence of serenity in everlasting silence. Individuals, laws, principles, sacred not to be broken. Deep mental language awoken. So this was the last word spoken, I quote it. I'll be dead with eyes open. Devils approaching, spiritual essence erosion, physical frozen, cold-hearted, no longer living. One of the many chosen to escape this planet of prison, granted the wisdom. Second chance, since forgiven. Resurrection was given, dead who walks amongst the living, arisen to fulfill prophecies. I'm the chosen. 7 seas and oceans turn to blood, which is potent, malevolent epidemics equivalent to those of this age. Deliverance of 7 new plagues, revelations, a sequel of Babylon's upheaval. Tabernacles, cathedrals, not sanctuaries for evil. Messengers sent to be linked with murderers, which are feeble. Want to murder the world or create a new race of people. Want to murder the world and create a new race of people.
What's up, guys? Yo, let's turn this shit off, man. What's up, guys? It's another day. We're gonna go back. I'm actually highly invested into this revisionist book. It's actually pretty interesting. I want to at least cover the introduction. You know, I will say it basically reads like a Bible. This is like basically a modern version of the Bible, if you guys will. You know, like after Jesus wrote the original Bible, Christian Bible. After he got crucified, killed like Hitler, Then his followers came up with some random nonsense and then rewrote the Bible. It's essentially the Bible. The way they talk about the battles and the epics and stuff reads exactly like the Bible. I feel like that's like the direct inspiration for this text right here, you know? But without further ado, we shall get into it. I want everybody to remember, no woman allowed in chat. If you're a woman, you go to Rumble chat. That's your segregation corner. Stay over there. Don't talk. Don't speak in my YouTube chat. Don't type in my Kick chat. No nothing. No woman allowed, guys. No woman allowed. Banned. All women are banned from my stream. Okay. So, where do we leave off at? Where do we leave off? Completely silenced fire. Oh, yeah, he's talking about Poland. In the armed conflict that began the dawn of September 1st, 1939, the germs of what is to come were throbbed. And what happened then? The shadows of what the future reserves for us are already filtered. And the reverberations of the Second World War... Here, let me put my face on this. In the Second World War, there are lightning bolts that light the decades and perhaps the centuries to come. Much has been said about the war. A sea of almost inexhaustible dates overwhelms and will overwhelm the first historians for a long time. Most of this data is hieroglyphic. Facts and figures, despite the conclusiveness of their concrete quality, are often just symbols or frontispieces of deeper realities. To understand this war and the monstrous deception that the world suffered with it, simply seeing the sea of data is the same as contemplating, classifying, or recounting appearances of cuneiform inscriptions and assuming that with this, the Sumerian civilization was known. Like, dude, this dude is acting like the Second World War is like some fucking ancient mystical thing, you know, that's hard to discover, all this other shit. It's like straight up like, dude, it's not fucking rocket science. Yeah, any war, even in the most modern war, such as the Ukrainian-Russian conflict, there's a lot of facts that get bogged down in the details. There's a lot of misinformation. In fact, governments, militaries, and stuff specifically have operations. Here, let me remind you guys of this thing called psychological warfare. Let's give my boys a shout out again. Let's give my boys a shout out. Let's give the boys a shout out again. The psyopers. Yo, shout out my CIA agent. Shout out my FBI handler. Shout out my local stalker fed.
Goddamn army.
There's another force applied in combat that we generally don't think of as a weapon of war. That weapon is words. Words are weapons.
Telling the truth is the only way in which to influence people.
This is psychological warfare.
Yeah, shout out the boys. Shout out the boys. Yeah, this nigga's like, It's kind of ridiculous, but like that's you gotta understand. That's in the National Socialist philosophy. That's kind of how they characterize everything. They characterize it all in this religious, mystical rap and shit like that. The spiritual aspects and stuff, and it gives it that, how should I say? It gives the philosophy that belligerency to it, that blind faith, right? In any philosophy that doesn't hinge on reality, that hinges on misperceptions, misconstruals of reality or whatever have you, things that could be easily thwarted with simple logic, deduction, reason. For the philosophy to sustain itself, the ideology to sustain itself and keep the people to stay within the logic of that philosophy, you need that blind faith. You have to have that blind faith. Without that blind faith, you'll eventually get disillusioned and fall out of the philosophy, the ideology. And what's even worse than an outsider of an ideology and philosophy critiquing that philosophy and ideology is an insider of that philosophy and ideology critiquing that philosophy and ideology, because they have better understanding of the philosophy and all that other stuff, so they have much more grounds and critiques that they can validly point out, rather than having to go through all the research and stuff like that and point out the various arguments and stuff, formulate arguments. They already know all that shit, dude. What's known between the symbols and their significance mediates an abyss. The past war specifics had become darker because of the technical advances put at the diffusion of thought. Radiograms, cablegrams, books, films, like what? Radiograms, cablegrams, books, films, brochures, etc. have positive orientation front and its negative side of confusion, according to the sense in which they are used. Yeah. In and after the war, they have been used to confuse. Before this, psychological warfare has been long-standing throughout human history. Think about in the battle of the Persians versus whatever fucking country, I forget. They just painted faces on their shields, and they painted like moths on their shields, which held religious symbolism for that other country, and they managed to get that country to retreat easily just because they used psychological warfare. Psychological warfare, espionage, stuff like that, has a long standing within human history. Isn't anything new. Isn't anything different. The only things that have really propagated with the advent of radiograms and cablegrams. I'm not going to say books, because books have been around forever. I'm not going to say brochures, because brochures have been around forever. Maybe films, but films have been around since like 1912, 1910, since the television was invented and shit. So can't really say that. But the only thing different is just the wider reach of information, which in the beginning wasn't as wide as people had seen. They were actually pretty expensive. These things that we think of as cheap and flimsy nowadays were pretty expensive back then. And then in addition, like, it's still the same effects. Maybe you see the effects of long-term propaganda and stuff like that occur much faster rather than the short-term, rather than the slow-winded propagation which occurred when information didn't travel as fast in the old days, The reason why you still got stupid barbaric tribes, with nonsense mysticism is because the propaganda, the lies, the slanders, whatever, travel through word of mouth, and word of mouth does not get around as fast, especially if you have geographical limitations, A flood of chronicles with the dosed intention of apparently historical books, broadcast, and that's been around. That's been around since before, Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan. was demonized as an anti-Christian text and all this other stuff. It was demonized by the British government at the time as causing the plagues and causing the storms and causing all the maladies, because God is striking them down, because Thomas Hobbes wrote a book on the Leviathan, called the Leviathan and shit, dude. So like, it's this is like, he's basically living in fantasy, dude. He's living in fantasy as he's writing this, dude, acting like this is novel things. This is something that hasn't been seen before. Information hasn't been used like that before. Was it what was that revolt? What was that slave revolt? The Pain Revolt or whatever? Pain Revolt. No, was it Thomas Paine? What is it called? Thomas Paine's pamphlet, The Common Sense, and some of the pamphlets that were spread around in America did great wonders in convincing the population to revolt against fucking Britain. Even while there was a bunch of turncoats. There was a bunch of redcoats amongst our midst. What was that? Where was it? I forget what the fuck it was called. It was something Rebellion, dude. Not Nat Turner's Rebellion, no. It's by some white dude. It was white dude with fucking Indians, dude. Whatever, man. But yeah. This isn't like something new. This isn't novel. And his characterization of this as like some novel new thing is fucking... It's in Fantasyland. A flood of chronicles with dosed intentions of a blah blah blah. Broadcasted films under the intangible influence of the, and wait, I'll just say this. What's pretty interesting? He's talking about all this, but how many German archaeologists and all this other stuff during World War II, claimed, did the exact same thing with their claims to the Aryan spirit and their fucking adventures in Egypt and stuff, and why they have to be in Africa and all this other nonsense. Like, he's just hyper focusing on a certain part. He's biased, dude. He's biased, and he's not looking at it in a wholehearted manner, dude. Nothing is so strange that even the most serene, objective, impartial spirits, not to mention masses lacking self-opinion, reach the wrong conclusions. And I disagree. The masses do have self-opinion. They're just fucking retards, so their opinions aren't worth shit. Their opinions conform to trends and all these other things, dude. But I think that's really important to notice, dude. You can also see how close National Socialism is to communism with how they look at the masses, dude. They literally look at the masses as there's a collective mind. Let's look at the Communist Manifesto. Do I still have it? I don't think I have it downloaded on this computer. Let me get it. Let me download it real quick. Let me download it. Oh yeah, his name was Frederick Engels. Oh yeah, I'm putting it in the shipbook folder. Okay, so you'll notice that all the socialists have like such contempt for the general public. They have such contempt for everybody who's not part of their group, dude. Blah 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 blah. Jesus, why is there so many prefaces, dude? Why each time they gotta make a new fucking preface? Oh, preface there, preface. Shit. Communism is already acknowledged by itself. Where do they start talking about it? Blah 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 blah. Blah blah blah. Markets. Blah blah blah. No, blah blah blah. Taxes. Blah blah blah. Blah 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 blah. The machinery, though. The machines. Oh no, not the machines. The lower middle class. Oh. Wage labor rests exclusively on competition between laborers. Yeah. Yeah, you know why? I'm sorry, that shit just triggers me, dude. You know why wage labor rests on the competition between laborers? Because you want to get money, dude. You're trying to sell your labor, dude. You're trying to sell your fucking labor so you get money, dude. So that they purchase your labor instead of buying somebody else's labor, dude. The proletarians... Okay, there we go. The communists do not form a separate party opposed to the other working class parties. They have no interest separate from blah, blah, blah. In the national struggles, in the various stages of development. The communists, therefore, are on one hand practically the most advanced and resolute section of the working class parties of every country. The immediate aim of the communists is the same as that of all the proletarian parties: formation of the proletariat into a class, overthrow the bourgeoisie, primacy and conquest of political power by the proletariat. Blah blah blah. Property. Blah 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 blah. Where does it say? They make it specifically known that you confess that by individual you mean no other person than the bourgeois. Like what? Where is it, dude? Actually, this Communist Manifesto was much more accurate version of it. The communists are further approached with the desiring to abolish countries and nationality. The working men have no country. We cannot take from... What? Like, dude, like, In proportion as the proportion, blah, blah, blah. Where is it at, dude? Here, I don't know why I didn't just... Collective. Home to men's minds, the sufficiency of the various, see, masses. German socialism forgot. Yeah, whatever, dude. I'm not really interested in fucking going through Communist Manifesto, man. They explicitly say that they have such contempt for the masses, the unthinking masses. They think the proletariats don't have their own opinion and they're brainwashed by the bourgeoisie, etc. This isn't the same copy of the fucking Communist Manifesto that I read, but you can really see how close the communists are to the National Socialists. In fact, all of them are socialists, dude. All of them are socialists, and there's a bunch of the socialists have these opinions that, one, the masses cannot be trusted. Two, they need the government and rulers to control them, because the government and rulers and the communists, socialists, whatever, are better judges than them. You know, they will guide them to Utopia, dude, Agartha, if you will. That is why many firm consciences... What's up, Zooch? Yeah, what's up, Zooch? Yeah, this is a void-free zone. Tenant Drip Dick. Yeah. That's pretty funny, dude. Yeah, but that is why many firm consciousness have insensibly endorsed the foreign and tricky way of raising the global problem. Of the Second War. Once the first false step has been taken, the following are wrong as well. And that is why it is so frequent that men of deep understanding and solid judgment now confess their bewilderment to international events. These niggas be like, oh, you got a sound judgment, you got a deep understanding, you got a solid judgment, you got to understand everything, dude. A new examination of what happened and why it happened can clarify present events and help anticipate future ones. The monstrous deception that the world suffered by immolating millions of lives and consuming immeasurable efforts on fire, and then being in an incomparably worse situation than the previous one, is not the work of chance. What, nigga? The National Socialists were part of that, dude. We're part of the ones that started the fires of war, dude. What are you talking about, dude? If the result were only disorder, perhaps nothing would be suspicious. But in the bankruptcy that the Western world is now facing now, an admirable fabric is hidden in the 100 events. Then the apparent disorder, there is an admirable linkage of facts that obey the same impulse and march towards the same goal. Why does every single one of these four words just speaking nonsense? They're just speaking goddamn mysticism and all this other. Just say it. Just say the idea. Why do you gotta describe it in so many ways, man? Just say it, dude. Fuck. Behind all this, there's an intelligence and a force. The current situation. This is like straight up like religious polemics. If you guys ever listen to like read papers on old religious polemics and stuff like that, this is exactly how they speak, dude, with this like religious fanaticism, dude. And this nonstop word salad that they just fucking throw out, dude. The current situation is not a fortuitous result of the disorder, but the remarkable culmination of a series of acts that are linked following a sequence and a path. Okay, look. Look how many times he said the same thing. Within the apparent disorder, there is an admirable linkage of facts that obey the same impulse and march towards the same goal. Okay, one. Behind this, there's an intelligence and a force. Okay, you could say that's slightly different. It's basically the same thing. The current situation is not a fortuitous result of disorder, but the remarkable culmination of serious acts linked to following sequence and a path. Dude, in 3 sentences, he repeated basically the same thing without telling you shit. Without going to the conclusion, dude. The West is suddenly, in the moment, more committed in its history, but its misfortune has not descended from accidental events. It has been carefully, scrupulously carved. Four times. This entire paragraph right here is him repeating the same thing over and over, rewording it in different ways. And that's it, dude. That's the entire paragraph, man. Examining the origins and development of the Second World War, lights emerge that explain the present, such is the purpose of this book. Many of those who saw the Macedonian phalanges disappear, of those who witnessed the fall of Alexander, nobody witnessed it. All of them were dead. Okay, the assassination of Caesar, capitulation of Napoleon, they thought they were attending ordinary events, but they were witnessing glares that ignite every zigzag in history. What we have now, insight, what we now have insight is more than the brightness of a simple change. It is immeasurable fire of a culture that falls without knowing why it senses the footsteps of mortal danger. Okay, now we're gonna start. Yo, we finally get into the introduction, man. The Jewish people as a whole will become its own Messiah. It will attain world domination by the dissolution of other races, by abolition of frontiers, the annihilation of monarchy, and by the establishment of a world republic in which the Jews will everywhere exercise the privilege of citizenship. In this new world order, the children of Israel will furnish all the leaders without encountering opposition. The governments of the different peoples forming the world republic will fall without difficulty into the hands of the Jews. It will then be possible for the Jewish rulers to abolish private property. What? And everywhere to make use of the resources of the state. So what he's talking about is communism. He's talking about communism. That's what it seems like he's talking about. Yeah. Oh, it's a letter to Karl Marx. Yeah. Yep. Resources of the state. Thus will promise the Talmud be fulfilled, in which is said that when the Messianic time comes, the Jews will have all the property of the whole world in their hands. Like, but the thing I really don't understand is when you break it down, like, it's like, oh, the Jews are going to take all the property, so we should take all the property first. What? Dude, but, you're still depriving people of property. You're still fulfilling those obligations. You're still falling into it, dude. And then And then it's a picture of Karl Marx. Why is there a picture of Karl Marx right there, dude? Why? Why does he just have a... What does this mean, dude? What does it all mean, man? What does it all mean, dude? Russian steeps. Wait, let me go through this. Because if this is like... If this is the... I gotta see if this is the beginning of the fucking Bible shit, dude. Yeah, so essentially this is they're talking about communism, dude. They're talking about communism. They're not talking about the Jews. They're talking about communism, guys. Just in case anybody's confused. I understand it's hard to understand, but you gotta understand how Hitler and Mein Kampf framed communism, dude. Hitler and Mein Kampf, mind you, Hitler used to be a communist. He was a communist before he joined the Deutsche Workers' Party, whatever. And so what he framed, a lot of what he's talking about, the Jews and all this other stuff, and it's kind of like a blanket term. The way that Hitler uses it throughout Mein Kampf. He uses it, one, to represent the communists, one, to represent the bourgeoisie, and then 3, to represent the bankers and the state. Right? He sees all of them as a single entity and groups them all together under the big name of Jew, you know. But it's not... In this, it's obvious that they're fucking talking about the communists, dude. 69 years of unforgettable fight. In the second half of the last century, the shady forests and extreme steeps of Russia, already guarded as jealousy as now, the enigmatic mystique of the Russian soul. Outside their borders, only a few minds modulated to hear the passing of the centuries to come managed to glimpse something among those few minds on the shoulder of an era glimpsed by the political future. Nietzsche envisioned in... Whenever you hear Nietzsche get bringed up as if he's a valid character, anything like that, you know it's gonna be some shit, dude. You know it's gonna be some shit, man. Nietzsche envisioned in 1886, it is in France where the will is falling. The willpower is more pronounced in Germany, in England, in Spain, and Corsica, by the adamant heads of its inhabitants. But it is more developed in Russia, where the willpower for a long time accumulated awaits the opportunity to unleash. I wish the Russian threat would grow for Europe to put itself in defense and gather a lasting terrible will to set a goal of millennia. The time of small politics has passed. The next century promises a fight for world domination. At that time, Russia was struggling in bloody turbulence, which a strange mixture of nihilists and Marxists revolutionaries tried to channel through a secret executive committee. Now, I think nihilist is a poor term. Nihilism is a philosophy. It's not a political philosophy. So, what he actually means is Marxist revolutionaries. Nihilism is more of a philosophy. It's not really an ethics. It's more of epistemology, if you will, rather than an ethical belief. And an ethical belief gives rise to your political belief, you know. So obviously their political belief is Marxism. And Marxism as Hegelian dialectic as its kind of ethical spectrum, if you will, or a subjective spectrum. Revolutionaries try to channel through a secret executive community. The backbone of that bold move was made up by the hardworking and intelligent Israelites. Israel didn't exist then, dude. Who are the Israelites, dude? They're fighting this ghost enemy, dude. The good, you see this a lot. You see this a lot in the anti-Semitism of old days. Before Israel became a state, right? This is what you would see, you would see this a lot, where they would just say everything. They would like the Jews, the Israelites, the Jews. They were the fucking ghosts behind every corner, dude. These fools would blame, stub their toe on a rock. It's the Israelites' fault, such shit, dude. Like, swear to God, dude. And it's like, dude, like, what do you mean? It's the Israel, like it just Jews everywhere, dude. Jews behind corner, all this other stuff, and in the old world. Nah, it wasn't that extensive back then. That had endured severe suffering in Russia's harsh environment for many generations. Since the first years of our era, Jewish immigrants had already settled in the territories that centuries later would be part of southern Russia. Painful vicissitudes have lived since then, but they never lost their racial cohesion. And then this is kind of the problem with the Jewish identity, or no, the view of the Jewish identity back in the days, because they saw Jews as a single race, but it's more of a religion. It was more of a religion at that point. At that point, it was much more of a religion rather than being this racial category, because it was so, like, religion was extensive, dude. Religion was extensive. Religion was fucking spread out throughout the world, dude. So the whole racial concept, yes, you got people who, they call them the cathartic Jews and all the gypsies and all these other things, which gypsies aren't really Jewish people. But they're Jewish race. There's a Jewish race now. But back then, if you simply converted to Judaism, somehow you became part of the Jewish race, dude, and that just completely turns this whole biological, all the cultural descriptions of race, it just turns it into a bunch of nonsense, dude. Just ill-defined nonsense, man. In 1648, the Cossacks launched themselves furiously against them, and after bloody clashes, they prohibited Israelite communities from living in Ukraine. In general, the population was hostile to them, so reluctant to the fusion of blood and customs. Yeah, and it was because of religion, dude. It was because of religion, man. Every religion, Islam and Christianity, hate other religions, but they have a special hatred for the Jews, dude. And to be honest, I think it comes from the fucking seed of their so-called prophets, dude. Muhammad was mad that the Jews that would ordain people as prophets didn't accept him, so he made his own religion. He's like, fuck that, I don't care. I'm gonna go to wage war, man. I'm a prophet, nigga. And Jesus was an Israelite, dude. Jesus was Jewish, and he left the Jew. He hated the synagogue of evil and all this other stuff. He left the Jews like many Jews do. It's just so much nonsense, dude. The Russian lands continue to attract incessantly Jewish communities emigrated from Western Europe. Empress Elizabetha Petrovna was alarmed at this phenomena. In 1743, refused to admit more immigrants. However, 50 years later, the annexation of Polish territories turned thousands of Jews into subjects of Russia. The Israelite communities, and there's a question to be had. If these Jewish communities have been in these countries and stuff for so long, wouldn't that make your country Jewish, dude? Does that mean like every country is Jewish? Like, it's just like you just follow the logic. You follow the logic, like unbiased and stuff, and then it just like keeps breaking down, dude. It just keeps breaking down, and it just turns into a bunch of nonsense, man. Israelite communities increased considerably, blah blah blah. Okay, you know, that's enough, dude. Bolshevism. Yeah, that's enough, guys. Okay, I'm done with that book. If you guys want to recommend a new book, you guys can recommend it. Till then, fucking going back to intellectuals and race. Yeah, but telling you, dude, that book is fucking. It is trash, dude. I can't lie, dude. Revisionism. I think, honestly, my honest opinion on the philosophy of these neo-national socialists, their philosophy is much worse than the original National Socialism. 100%. 100%. Much worse. More bogged down. More retarded. More fanatic. Less logic. And the straight up cope that they have, dude. There's so much cope in that book, dude. It's just like, Jesus, man. It's it really makes me, really makes me think, man. It really makes me think, like, all these neo-Nazi LARPers, dude. And these people that try to meme it into relevancy and stuff like that. These are the tactics they have to do to give validity, because their ideology is stupid, dude. Their philosophy is stupid. If it wasn't like some mentally ill retard that they're taking advantage of, then they have to make it into a joke, dude. This is why on my channel, my streaming career, and everything like that, I never did that neo-Nazi grift. I never do the neo-Nazi memes and stuff like that. I don't like it, dude. I can tell that there's evil intentions behind it. They try to hide it. Behind jokes. Oh, it's just a meme, dude. Oh, we're just trying to trigger people, dude. But when you really break it down, dude, it's actually some sick propaganda to take advantage of the human proclivity to have fun and trigger people, dude. And it's like a shit philosophy that cannot stand on its own, but gets credence, gets relevance, because people think it's like a funny joke because it triggers people, dude. You know, like, oh, haha, I'm edgy, dude. I want, like, at least Snorter Coco do it. How many of these people who like using National Socialists as memes, like, I wonder how many of those people are willing to do other socially taboo things for a meme. Will they claim themselves as pedophiles? Will they claim themselves to like underage women and stuff? Be rapists? Claim themselves to be rapists? Slander themselves in all forms of character? 9 times out of 10, they don't. They still sit on this moral high ground and all this other shit. It's all part of a fucking psyop, dude. It's all a psyop, and I refuse to play that game, man. Always have, always will. National Socialism is trash. Socialism as a concept is trash. And like, no matter how much these people try to make it seem like it's a good idea, it just is just trash at the end of the day, dude. They have to use selective editing, all these various tricks and stuff that they claim that the Jews do to propagate their shitty ass belief, dude. The same coincidence seems to have occurred in a number of various countries. Arrival of large number of overseas Chinese. Wait, let's start off right here. Jews have been similarly prominent, if not predominant, in the apparel industry. Whether in medieval Spain, the Ottoman Empire, Eastern Europe, Argentina, or the United States, yet intellectuals' emphasis on external circumstances over internal cultures led an academic historian to say that Jewish immigrants to the United States were fortunate that they arrived in this country just when the garment industry was about to take off. The same coincidence seems to have occurred in a number of various other countries. Arrival of large number of overseas Chinese in various countries in Southeast Asia galvanized particular sectors of economies there, and the arrival of Huguenots galvanized the watchmaking industry of 17th century. Yeah, I remember where I left off. In addition to intergroup differences in particular occupational skills, there are large consequential differences in median age. Okay, where did I leave off? Historical happenstances. The fact that certain decisive okay, yeah, I read that. Since the geography of the planet is not something socially constructed, the misfortunes of lagging groups are not automatically a social injustice. Okay, so why did it not save where I left off, motherfucker? Rigid division between... Okay. Verbal sop, those who are lagging. Okay, I think it was right here. This page. Cultural attitudes, which in some societies create a rigid... which create a rigid division between women's work and men's work, or which manual labor repugnant to people with education, or caste run in societies which drastically limit the sources from which particular talents can be drawn for accomplishing particular tasks, all affect the economic potential of a given society. A society which throws away the talents and potentialities of half of its population by making many economic roles and endeavors off limits to women can hardly be expected to match the economic performances of societies which do not restrict their own prospects like this. In a society with rigid class or caste divisions, the highly varied talents and potentialities which arise among individuals may not arise solely or even predominantly among those individuals who happen to be born within the rigid class or caste stratifications in which their talents and potentialities are considered appropriate, or in which those talents and potentialities have opportunities to reach fruition. These are among the many reasons why societies, races, and civilizations are extremely unlikely to have identical achievements, even in the complete absence of genetic deficiencies or social injustices. What does all this boil down to? 1. Grossly uneven distributions of racial, ethnic, and other groups in numerous fields of endeavor have been common in countries around the world and for centuries of recorded history. 2. The even, proportional, or statistically random distributions of these groups, which has been taken as a norm, deviations from which have been regarded as evidence of their genetic differences in ability in the early 20th century, or as evidence of maltreatment by others in the late 20th century, has seldom, if ever, been demonstrated empirically, or even been asked to be demonstrated. The disparity in burdens of proof for different beliefs about the causes of inequality of outcomes rivals the disparities in these outcomes themselves, not only in American media and popular discourse, but in academic institutions and in courts of law, all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States. No burden of proof whatsoever is required for the presumption that disparate outcomes at a given institution constitute prima facie evidence of discrimination at that institution, which legally shifts the burden of proof of innocence to the accused, contrary to the legal traditions in which other contexts where it is the accuser who has the burden of proof, whether criminal or in civil cases. Behavior and beliefs. Not only do different racial, ethnic, and other groups differ in their occupational skills and experience, they tend also to differ in their beliefs and behavior toward other groups and internally among themselves. Reluctance to associate with any group, whether at work or in a neighborhood or other settings, is almost automatically attributed by intelligentsia to ignorance, prejudice, or malice, in utter disregard of not only the first-hand experience of those who are reluctant, but also of objective data on vast differences in rates of crime, alcoholism, and substandard school performances between groups, even though such differences have been common in countries around the world for centuries. Yeah, that's why I don't hang out with niggers, dude. I don't hang out with niggers, not because I hate black people and stuff. It's just most niggers I don't like, dude. They're extremely criminal, oppressive, etc., you know. Cholera, for example, was unknown in America until large numbers of Irish immigrants arrived in the 19th century. And cholera outbreaks in New York, Philadelphia, went largely through Irish neighborhoods. People who did not want to live near Irish immigrants as a result of diseases, violence, and other social pathology rampant in the Irish communities of that era cannot be automatically dismissed as blinded by prejudice or deceived by stereotypes. It's actually pretty interesting. Germans in St. Louis were principally concentrated in northern and southern sections of the city. The Irish also had their own special area, and it was never safe to venture from one section into the other. Rioting occurred also when Irish rowdies interfered with German picnics, frequently for no apparent reason except to add excitement to the otherwise dull Sunday. The Irish in America. Yo, you know what? I kind of want to read this book, dude. The Irish in America. What? Yo, the Irish are niggers, dude. Yo, fucking potato niggers, man. Dude. Yo, that's some straight up potato nigger shit, dude. Oh, these niggas aren't even giving me the real book, dude. I gotta fucking copy the whole shit. Yo, that's looking hilarious, bro. Oscar Hanlon, Boston's Immigrants. You know, and that's the thing. That's the thing that we, you know, that's the thing where a lot of people, you know, a lot of people, you can really tell, you can really tell somebody's understanding of America and the true history of America, by who they think of as like people who had nigger-like behaviors throughout American history, dude. You know, and the Irish when they came over were like big nigger-like people. They were basically potato niggers. They are potato niggers, man. And somebody who like critique the black community, the modern black nigger community and stuff, and then not remember like how there's been a common trend of like such cultures with decayed cultures and stuff like that, decayed ethics, philosophies and stuff like that, developing in such a way to like act like niggers, dude. If they think it's like solely the black community that does that, they're mistaken. You see the same thing with the Mexicans nowadays, or the Latino community as well, dude. But like it's been rampant throughout like American history has been filled with people like that, dude. Filled. New immigrants coming into America or stuff like that, rejecting the base Enlightenment American culture and being like ignorant barbarians and shit. It's common. It was common throughout American history, dude. What is that book? Carl Witt. See if it'll pop up now. No, don't. No, mind you, I'm not like defending the black community or anything. I'm just saying that there's a bigger symptom, there's a bigger cause of this than oh, the Library of Congress servers are down. What? But there's a bigger symptomology and bigger trend that causes such degradation of whole communities and whole subgroups of Americans into like straight up degeneracy and fucking niggerly behavior, dude. John Francis McGuire. Okay, so it said page 180. Let's see if this is the actual book. What is it? Page 190? 183. Yeah, I think this is different. This is a different book. $183, so is it this book? Extract was published, serving out water twice. No, this is the wrong book. Why is it so hard to fucking find this book, man? William Russell. No, this is a different book. Haven't started drifting apart yet, falling apart yet. Kids don't know when they will come to the party. We can be late, it's not too late. Okay, it's by Carl Witt. We haven't even started yet. Yep, it's by Carl Witt. And tonight they'll find our beds empty. Neighbors' graveyards whistle down 10th Street. We'll shove sleep to the other side of our lives. Morning or old age, we won't go down with the sun. We'll rise again from whatever we've been dreaming. We'll found it. Found it. But it's hidden behind fucking Internet Archive, dude. See if I can find a free copy. Yeah, no, I'm not trying to sign in. Strenuous efforts, especially by the Catholic Church, to change the behavior patterns within Irish American communities suggest that it was not all a matter of other people's perceptions or stereotypes. Moreover, these efforts within the Irish American communities ultimately paid off, as barriers against the Irish, epitomized by employers' signs that said "No Irish need apply," faded over the generations. Such barriers were not simply a matter of mistaken or malign ideas in other people's heads, nor were the Irish simply abstract people in an abstract world. However much that vision may flatter intellectuals' desires to be on the side of the angels against the forces of evil, there is no need to go to the opposite extreme and claim that all negative views of all groups are based on valid reasons. The point here is that this is an empirical question to be investigated in terms of the particular facts of the particular group at a particular time and place. A process circumvented by reasoning, as if discussing abstract people in an abstract world. You know, what I find interesting is you can kind of see the reverse of this in the black community, in fact, where instead of what you call it, instead of like trying to improve the community throughout the civil rights period and later to the 70s, and during that period, you instead see groups and actors within the black community trying to promote negative behaviors, promote asocial behaviors. And then you actually start seeing that culminating in the 1990s during the great welfare resurgence and the welfare state. You see that during the kind of towards the end of the 1980s, and you see that in the early 2000s, right? You see the people inside the black community promote asocial behaviors, promote bad behaviors in the black community, see that as the ideal of behavior, see that as the ideal of conduct within the black community and stuff like that. It slowly gains traction, slowly became more popular as hip-hop rose, and as all these other things rose, as the welfare state rose, as the black family disintegrated, as people became more dependent on the welfare state and stuff like that. You actually see a reverse trend in where these negative actors, these bad actors, and the black community who accepted their word as good, who accepted those beliefs, start to fucking destroy the culture. It's turned into a bunch of trash, complete trash culture now, filled with rampant niggers all over the place. You actually see the reverse of that, whereas, in this case, when the Irish came as potato niggers, they came to America as potato niggers, and then they became a civilized potato person, They became civilized potato people. You actually see the reverse. This is actually a pretty interesting social phenomenon. Now, I argue that this fact, this reality of the trends of the black community further supports the fact that modern black culture is evil, should be shunned, should be thrown in trash, and scrapped away, completely thrown in trash. All this nig pop, all this shit pop, throw it in the trash. All this all this gang culture, criminal culture, throw it in the trash. All this worship of drug usage and all this other stuff, throw it in the trash. All this hate of reading. These niggas hate reading. These niggas hate reading. These niggas hate thinking. These niggas hate using big words. Throw that in the trash and give these niggers some books. Give these niggers some books and crowns. Crayons, not crowns, crayons. 100%, dude. 100%, man. And that's where it comes. That's where really it comes from. Behavior and beliefs. Behavior and beliefs. That's ultimately the greatest destroyer of nations. More so than anything. More so than all these other things. Having shitty behavior and shitty beliefs will destroy your nation, dude. Claim that, go to the opposite extreme and claim that all negative views of all groups are based on valid reasons. The point here is that this is an empirical question to be investigated in terms of the particular facts of the particular group at a particular time and place. a process circumvented by reasoning as if discussing abstract people in an abstract world. People sort themselves out in innumerable ways, between races and within races, as well as in situations where race is not a salient factor. For example, studies have shown the correlation between the IQs of husbands and their wives to be similar to, and sometimes greater than, the correlation between IQs of brothers and sisters. Real. That's real. Nobody wants a fucking stupid ass bitch, or you kind of want somebody the same level, dude. '57 Arthur R. Jensen. How much can we boost IQ and scholastic achievement? Harvard Education Review. Only fact that people behave differently toward people whom perceive as similar to themselves seems likely to explain IQ correlations between people who get married, even though they do not give IQ tests to one another before deciding to wed. It is easy to tell when different racial and ethnic groups live separately, when these groups have physical differences that are visible to the naked eye, blacks and whites being an obvious example. However, such residential differences are common in countries around the world, even when there are no physical differences to catch the eye of observers. As late as the second half of the 20th century, if one wished to have Americans of Northern European ancestry and Americans of Southern European ancestry living randomly distributed with one another in the New York metropolitan, it would be necessary to move just over half of all Americans of Southern European ancestry. At the beginning of the 20th century, when Jewish immigrants and their children were concentrated in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, they were not randomly distributed. Hungarian Jews were clustered together, as were Polish, Romanian, and other Jews. Meanwhile, German Jews lived uptown in Chicago, and when Eastern European Jews began moving into German Jewish neighborhoods, German Jews began moving out. It was much the same story among blacks in Chicago. Sociological studies by E. Franklin Franzier. Oh, the base nigga Franzier. In 1930s found different classes of blacks living in different parts of Chicago's black community. Some black neighborhoods in Chicago had delinquency rates over 40%, and others had delinquency rates under 2%. Meanwhile, in Harlem, during the same era, observant subway riders could see the porters and domestics get off at West 125th Street, the clerks and secretaries depart on the West 135th Street, and the doctors and lawyers leave at the 145th Street. In Italian East Harlem, people from Genoa live clustered together and separate from clusters of Italians from Naples or Sicily. Similar regional clusters of Italians existed on New York's Lower East Side, as well as in San Francisco, Cleveland, New Haven, and other American cities. None of this was peculiar to the United States. Similar clusters of Italians from peculiar places in Italy were also common in Buenos Aires and Toronto during the immigrant era. Considering an opposite approach may make a difference between reasoning in the abstract and reasoning in the concrete stand out more sharply. When a scholarly study of economic development in Latin America concluded, Costa Rica is different from Nicaragua because Costa Ricans are different from Nicaraguans. Its conclusion, whatever its merits or demerits, was one almost unthinkable within the confines of the vision prevailing amongst intellectuals today. Even as a hypothesis to be tested, the opposite approach, treating Costa Ricans and Nicaraguans as if they were abstract people in an abstract world, whose differences in outcomes could only be a result of external circumstances, has been far more common among the intelligentsia. You know, I'll say this. If anybody has noticed so far, Thomas Sowell uses a lot of like commie words and stuff. Thomas Sowell used to be a communist. Before he saw the wonders of capitalism. I don't think he's a true capitalist, mind you. But before he saw the wonders of capitalism, he was a communist first. And that's kind of where he gets a lot of his verbiage from, mind you. Oh, chapter 3 already, wow. Changing racial beliefs. For centuries, there have been beliefs that some races are superior to others. Various developments in the second half of the 19th century and in the early 20th century turned such general beliefs into organized ideologies with the aura of science, often creating the very dogmatism among intellectuals that science is meant to counter. By the end of the 20th century, opposite ideologies about race would prevail among intellectuals, sometimes also invoking the name of science, with no more justification and with the same dismissive attitude toward those who dared to disagree with the currently prevailing vision. This is for Snorri Coke. The term race, as it was used in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, was not confined to broad divisions of human species such as black, white, yellow races. Differences among Slavs, Jews, Anglo-Saxons were often referred to as racial differences as well. Madison Grant's influential 1960 bestseller, The Passing of the Great Race, was one of the writings which divided Europeans into Nordic, Alpine, and Mediterranean races, among others. Rather than become bogged down in semantic issues, we can refer to racial and ethnic groups loosely under the rubric of race, in part because more precise definitions could easily lose touch with social realities in a world of growing racial intermixtures over generations. These biological intermixtures have accelerated in our own times, even as the stridency of separate racial identity rhetoric has increased. These include people bitterly complaining about how half their ancestors mistreated the other half, as the current grievance of their own, whether among the Maoris of New Zealand or among various American racial or ethnic groups. With race as with war, 20th century intellectuals were concentrated on one end of the spectrum in the early years and then on the opposite end of the spectrum in later years. The prevailing overarching vision among intellectuals, that is, a preference for society guided from top down by ideas inspired by intellectual elites, was the same at the beginning and the end of that century. But this general preference need not require a commitment to a particular view of a particular issue such as race, even though whatever view happened to prevail among the intelligentsia at a given time was often deemed to be almost axiomatically superior to conflicting views held by others. Those other views often being treated as unworthy of serious intellectual engagement. In the early 20th century, Madison Grant referred to those who disagreed with his genetic determinism as sentimentalists. Here, hey, snort a Coke, here. Here, snort a Coke. Here's a book for you, dude. Here's a book for you. Here, I found a book about your whole belief on racial determinism before you could find it, dude. That's L, man. That's an L, dude. Okay. What was I saying? And in the late 20th century, those who disagreed with the prevailing racial orthodoxy of that era were often dismissed as racists. Intellectuals at opposite ends of the spectrum in different eras have been similar in another way. Both have tended to ignore the long-standing warning from statisticians that correlation is not causation. One race may be more successful than another at a particular endeavor or a whole range of endeavors for reasons that are neither genetic nor a result of the way the society nor a result of the way the society in which they live treats them. As noted in chapter 2, there are many historic, geographic, demographic reasons for groups to differ from one another in their skills, experiences, cultures, and values, whether these are different social, national, or racial groups. Genetic determinism. The mid-19th century sensation created by Charles Darwin's theory of evolution had ramifications far beyond the field of biology. The idea of survival of the fittest among competing species was extended by others into competition among human beings, whether among different classes or different races. The researcher Darwin's cousin Francis Galton, there he goes again, culminated in a book titled Hereditary Genius, which established that high achievers were concentrated in particular families. Correlation was treated as causation, with genetics being proclaimed to be reason for the achievement differential. Similar reasoning was applied to races. As a later scholar of Galton, he believed that in his own day, the Anglo-Saxons far outranked the Negroes of Africa, who in turn outranked the Australian Aborigines, who outranked nobody. Again, correlation was treated as causation, leading to eugenics, a term Galton coined to promote the differential survival of races. He said there exists a sentiment, for the most part quite unreasonable, against the gradual extinction of an inferior race. Whatever the validity of Galton's assessment of the relative achievements of different races in his own time, profound changes in the relative achievements of different races over the centuries undermined the theory of genetic determinism. China was, for centuries, technologically, economically, and in other ways more advanced than any country in Europe. The later reversals of that relative positions of the Chinese and the Europeans in the modern era, without any demonstrable changes in their genes, undermine Galton's genetic arguments. As other major reversals of the positions of other racial groups or subgroups would undermine the latter genetic determinism of other intellectuals. This is not to say that there was no great distinction in achievements among different races, either within societies or between societies as of a given time, nor that all such differences reverse over time, though many did. Once the automatic link between genetics and achievement is broken, it ceases to be a weighty presumption, even in the case of groups that have never been leaders in achievement. Whatever non-genetic factors have been able to produce profound differences in other situations cannot be ruled out a priori for any group, and therefore it remains a question to be examined empirically in each particular case. That is, if science is to be something more than an incantation invoked to buttress an ideology and silence as its critics. Much empirical evidence of large consequential differences among racial and ethnic groups, as well as social classes, accumulate in the late 19th century and early 20th century. Studies of the histories of families, as well as the spread of mental testing and sociological studies of differences in crime rates and educational achievements among children from different backgrounds, even when attending the same schools, added weight to the case made by the promoting genetic determinism. Contrary to the latter verbal fashions, these were not simply perceptions or stereotypes. These were painstakingly established facts, despite the serious problems with the inferences drawn from those facts, such as Madison's grand sweeping pronouncement, "Race is everything." The Progressive Era. The Progressive Era in the early 20th century, America was perhaps high water mark of scientific theories of racial differences. Real. The increasing immigration from Europe, and especially the shift in its origins from Northern and Western Europe to Eastern and Southern Europe, raised questions about racial equality of the new people flooding into the country, the beginning of the mass migrations of American blacks from the South to northern cities and their concentration in ghettos there, raised similar questions during the same era. Empirical data on group differences in crime rates, disease rates, mental test scores, and school performances fed all these concerns. Two huge compilations of empirical data in early 20th century America stand out particular. One was huge multi-volume report of the Federal Immigration Commission headed by Senator William P. Dillingham and published in 1911. This report showed, among other things, that with children who attended elementary school, 3/4 of the school days or more, 30% of native-born white children had been denied promotion to the next grade, compared to 61% of native-born black children and 67% of children of immigrant Polish Jews. What? Wait, what? No way. Here, wait up, I got it. You can see my abs, dude.
Favorite son, you always need more than one. Run your hands up my thigh, rub yourself until you're dry. Touch me with your rich hands, touch me with your rich hands, touch me with your rich hands, touch me time and time again. Touch me with your rich hands, touch me with your rich hands, touch me with your rich hands, country for an open. You tell me you want to are seeking something real. See your eyes look through my skull. See your hands on my controls. Touch me with your rich hands.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked. I didn't expect that. Wait, what? Let's look at it again. This report showed that, among other things, that with children who attended elementary school, three-quarters of the school days or more, 30% of native-born white children had been denied promotion to the next grade, compared to 61% of native-born black children and 67% of the children of immigrant Polish Jews. The other huge source of data about racial differences among racial or ethnic groups during this period was the mental testing of more than 100,000 soldiers by the U.S. Army during the First World War. The proportions of soldiers with different ancestries who exceeded the American national norms on mental tests were as follows. Soldiers, 67%. German, 49%. Irish. Damn, yo, wait, what? See the American national norms of mental. Well, okay, wait. So that means the soldier, people who were English ancestry and soldiers, they surpassed the norms of their fucking peers, dude. Irish, 26%, Russian, 19%, Italian, 14%, Polish, 12%. Men from Italy, Poland, and Russia scored consistently at or near the bottom among immigrants from Europe on various mental tests, with American blacks scoring at the bottom among soldiers as a whole, though scoring only marginally lower than these Southern and Eastern European immigrants on these tests. Among the civil population, the same group scored at or near the bottom in mental test scores, though in a slightly different order. Black children attending schools in Youngstown, Ohio, scored marginally higher on IQ tests than the children of Polish, Greek, and other immigrants there. In Massachusetts, a large proportion of black school children scored over 120 on the IQ test than did their schoolmates, who were children of Polish, Italian, or Portuguese immigrants. During this era, Northern blacks had somewhat higher IQs than Southern blacks. Another curious fact, which received much less attention at the time, was that the Army tests, and that's, guys, I think that's the saddest thing. I think that's the saddest thing about how Southern black culture was allowed to dominate and propagate and destroy Northern black culture. And destroy the black communities in the North and etc., right? Because when you think about it, the Northern blacks were so much better than the Southern blacks. Southern mystic, retard, slave blacks, so much better, dude. But for some reason, the black community sees those people as our cultural heirs. They see those people as our dominant culture and stuff, the dominant culture of black people and stuff like that. It's ridiculous, man. It's ridiculous, and it propagated the shittiest culture. The shittiest culture that produced the worst of the blacks somehow gained approval, gained prestige in the community, and was exported to all the different blacks. And what you'll see consequently is all the black cultures of the Northern blacks and stuff were slowly eradicated and replaced with Southern black culture, the most degenerate and worst cultures of the blacks. And it destroyed the black communities. Their IQs decreased drastically, crime rates increased drastically, retardation increased drastically, etc., dude. Only gay niggas are allowed. Proof. You're just seething because no woman allowed, dude. Women have no place in these discussions, guys. Do you really think women can contribute to this discussion? They're emotionalists, dude. They can't handle these facts, dude. They can't handle this debate, dude. Another curious fact, which received much less attention at the time, was that army tests in the First World War showed white soldiers from Georgia, Arkansas, Kentucky, Mississippi scoring lower on mental tests than black soldiers from Ohio, Illinois, New York, and Pennsylvania. Guys, Southern black culture is Southern culture. The South has always been a bastion of retarded whites, dude. It's not really shocking that the blacks of the North were better than had higher IQs than the Southerners, dude. However, the black population as a whole was overwhelmingly concentrated in the South at that time, which may explain why the army tests showed blacks scoring below the immigrants that they scored above in civilian tests conducted where they both went to the same schools in the North. Again, none of this was simply a matter of perception, stereotypes, or prejudices. Differences among racial, ethnic, regional groups were very real, sometimes very large and very consequential. What was at issue were the reasons for those differences. Moreover, the reasons for such differences that were acceptable to intellectuals changed radically over the generations, much as their support for the First World War and their latter pacifism marked drastic changes on that subject. During the early 20th century, demonstrable differences among the groups were largely attributed to heredity, and during the late 20th century, those differences were largely, if not solely, attributed to environment, including an environment of discrimination. Nevertheless, the same general vision of society prevailed among those who called themselves progressives at the beginning of the 20th century, and those who called themselves liberals later in that century. However, disparate their views on race were, between the two eras, theirs was a vision of the anointed, as surrogate decision makers in both periods, along with such corollaries as an expanded role for government, an expanded role for judges to reinterpret the Constitution so as to loosen its restrictions on the powers of government. Progressive era intellectuals took a largely negative view of the new immigrants of Southern and Eastern Europe, as well as American blacks in general, because such high proportion of the immigrants from Poland and Russia were Jews during this era. Carl Birmingham, a leading authority on mental tests and creator of the College Board Scholastic Aptitude Test, asserted that the army test results tended to disprove the popular belief that the Jew is highly intelligent. Yeah. Okay. I think that's a good spot to stop. I gotta clean up the house a bit. Yeah, so if major takeaways, Southern black culture is the worst culture of the blacks, and I don't know why all these black people seem to love and worship it. And revisionist, the philosophy of the neo-Nazis and the revisionist philosophies are actually really trash and stupid. Okay. Bye, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Have a good day.